It was supposed to be just another live broadcast, a casual interview, a light-hearted chat between one of Hollywood's most beloved stars and a seasoned TV host. But what happened next shocked everyone. Caroline Leavitt, the sharp-tongued host of the evening show, had built a reputation for being bold and fearless. Known for her cutting remarks and quick wit, she was often praised for her no-nonsense approach to interviewing celebrities. But on this night, Caroline went too far. As the camera rolled and the audience watched eagerly from their homes, Caroline looked at Keanu Reeves, the man known for his humble demeanor and cool, collected attitude, and dropped a bombshell. Without warning, she blurted out, "Keanu, do you ever feel like you're just playing the same character over and over? How does it feel to be stuck in your own typecast? Isn't it a bit boring?" The air went completely still. The studio went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Keanu, usually known for his calm and collected nature, just stared back at Caroline. The tension was unbearable. Everyone in the room was waiting for him to snap back, for him to react. But what happened next left everyone in awe. Instead of getting angry or defensive, Keanu simply smiled, and with a calmness that was almost unsettling, he said, "Well, Caroline, I think there's a lot more to life than the roles we play. But that's something you learn along the way, don't you?" The words hung in the air. It wasn't the response anyone expected. It wasn't a rebuttal. It wasn't an angry comeback. It was just wisdom. "Now I know what you're thinking. How could Caroline have insulted Keanu like that? What was she thinking? And why did he choose to respond in such an unexpected way? Well, stick with me, because what happens next will surprise you even more." Before we dive deeper into this unforgettable moment, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the rest of this story. Trust me, it's a journey you won't forget. Caroline Leavitt had always been the type of person who thrived on control. As a TV host, she built her career on her sharp wit and her ability to ask the tough questions that everyone else was too afraid to. Her boldness was her trademark, and it had made her one of the most recognized faces in television. But beneath that fearless exterior, there was a woman who, at times, struggled with insecurity. Caroline's rise to fame hadn't been easy. She had faced criticism, judgment, and at times, outright rejection, all of which pushed her to toughen up and build a persona that demanded respect. But in her journey to the top, she had lost touch with something important: empathy. She had been known for her brutal honesty, but the question was, had she crossed a line this time? Caroline grew up in a small town in New Jersey, where she quickly learned how to fend for herself. Her family, though loving, wasn't always the most supportive when it came to her dreams. She had a father who never understood why she wanted to leave their quiet life behind and chase after something so unpredictable. "The world doesn't care about your dreams," he used to tell her. "You need to get a real job." But Caroline wasn't interested in settling. She worked hard, clawing her way up through small-time gigs until she finally landed her big break. She was a host on the evening show. It was a victory she had fought for, but over time the pressure of staying on top took its toll. It wasn't until the incident with Keanu that Caroline realized just how much of herself she had lost in her quest for success. Keanu Reeves, on the other hand, had always been an enigma. He was the rare Hollywood star who seemed to exist outside the chaos of fame. Known for his roles in iconic films like The Matrix and John Wick, Keanu was beloved not only for his acting, but for his humility and kindness. Despite the fortune and recognition that came with his career, he remained grounded, often avoiding the limelight and keeping his private life well out of the public eye. Keanu wasn't your typical Hollywood superstar. He had faced his own share of personal tragedies, including the heartbreaking loss of his girlfriend Jennifer in a car accident years ago. Yet, despite all the hardship, Keanu remained incredibly down-to-earth, living a simple life away from the paparazzi. But what most people didn't know about Keanu was how deeply thoughtful he was. It wasn't just that he was kind, it was that he truly understood people, their struggles, and the complexity of life. His sense of peace was something that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than just fame. It was something earned through years of loss, struggle, and personal growth. So when Caroline attacked him on live TV, many expected him to retaliate. After all, Keanu had been criticized for his acting choices before, but never in such a public, personal way. People were watching, waiting for him to snap. Instead, they saw something entirely different, a response that no one could have predicted. As the cameras continued to roll, Caroline, now feeling the weight of her words, tried to mask her unease with a forced smile. But Keanu, with his calm and reflective demeanor, gave her no ammunition. His response wasn't just a witty retort. It was an invitation to a deeper conversation, one that Caroline wasn't expecting. Keanu's presence in the room suddenly shifted. It was no longer just about two people on a talk show. This was about two very different approaches to life. One shaped by defense mechanisms and cynicism, the other by wisdom and understanding. The silence lingered for a moment, almost as if the entire room was holding its breath. Caroline's sharp edges began to soften as she realized she wasn't facing the angry celebrity she'd expected, but rather a man who saw the bigger picture. And in that moment, Caroline started to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Vulnerability. The walls she'd carefully built around herself, walls that had allowed her to be the tough, untouchable host, began to crumble. She had made an enemy, or so she thought. But what she hadn't counted on was the lesson Keanu was about to teach. Her not with his words, but with his actions. But that was just the beginning. Before we dive into what happened next, if you're hooked on this story so far, don't forget to subscribe. The best is yet to come, and trust me, you won't want to miss how this story unfolds. The tension in the studio was palpable, hanging in the air like a thick fog. Caroline's biting comment had just landed, and she had expected a fiery retort. From Keanu, after all, she had crossed a line, hadn't she? But instead she was met with an unanticipated calmness. As Keanu spoke, his words were not just measured. They were like a balm to a wound Caroline didn't even know she had. And yet, the longer the silence stretched, the more uncomfortable she became. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was the one in control. This was her show. She was the one. With the power, the one who should be making the headlines. Caroline's mind raced. What had she done? She had known Keanu to be a bit reserved, but she hadn't expected this. There was no anger in his eyes, no sign of retaliation, but something in his words had pierced through her, leaving her unsettled. "You learn along the way," he had said. It was a simple phrase, but it rattled her. The audience, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, seemed to hold their breath as they waited for the next move. Caroline forced a smile, trying to regain control. "Well, Keanu, that's very noble. Of you, I suppose. But let's be honest, it's easy to be calm when you've already made it to the top, isn't it? Not everyone gets to just coast through life without facing real struggles." She had said it before. Only this time the words felt hollow coming from her lips. The people in the studio exchanged uneasy glances. What was Caroline really getting at? Was she defending her own insecurities? Keanu's gaze remained steady, almost serene, as if he had anticipated her shift in tone. There was a brief pause before he replied, his voice still soft, but carrying an undeniable weight. "Struggles don't define you, Caroline. It's how you deal with them that does." It wasn't the answer Caroline was looking for. She had pushed him in an attempt to provoke a response, maybe even a confrontation, but all she received was clarity. Clarity that cut deeper than she had expected. The pressure was building. Caroline could feel the tide turning. The more she tried to regain control, the more her own doubts crept in. "Why did I say that?" she thought, her inner voice echoing her discomfort. "I didn't mean to attack him, but why does it feel like I've just exposed something about myself?" The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the change in Caroline's demeanor. She was no longer the confident host. She was becoming something else, vulnerable. The sharp, biting words that had once rolled off her tongue with ease now felt foreign and out of place. Keanu, however, remained unwavering. His calmness wasn't arrogance, it was an invitation. He wasn't seeking a fight, he wasn't out to show her up. He simply wanted her to see something that, in her rush to be in control, she had overlooked. Caroline, now rattled, tried to salvage the interview. She steered the conversation back to safer territory, topics about Keanu's films, his charity, work, the usual scripted fluff that always made for easy talk show fodder. But the magic of that moment had already passed. The damage was done. Caroline could feel the weight of her words hanging between them, like a tangible thing. She had insulted a man who didn't fight back, and in not fighting back, he had won. The studio audience, once skeptical of Keanu's calmness, now saw something. Else there was no deflection, no anger, no defensiveness. Keanu had met her challenge with grace, a quality that was so foreign to Caroline's world of sharp edges and calculated moves. And that was when it hit her. Keanu hadn't just avoided reacting angrily. He had shown her a different way of dealing with conflict, the way of silence, the way of understanding, the way of being present, not for the sake of winning, but for the sake of something deeper, something that Caroline hadn't yet learned. The tension between the two was palpable, but it was shifting. Caroline was forced to confront something she had never expected, her own feelings of inadequacy. But what came next? Would Keanu let this moment go? Or was there more to him than even Caroline had realized? Before we get to the heart of the story, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the twists that lie ahead. Trust me, you'll want to see how this story unfolds next. Tato. Moment Keanu Reeves responded to Caroline's insult with his calm and wise words. The atmosphere in the studio shifted. What had started as a simple talk show interview had evolved into something far more profound. The confrontation was no longer about an actor defending his craft. It was about two people, one used to deflecting and attacking, and the other, a man who had mastered the art of quiet resilience, reaching a silent understanding. Caroline, caught off guard by the unexpected grace of Keanu's response, found herself grappling with emotions she wasn't prepared for. She had tried to push his buttons to provoke him into a reaction, but instead he had offered her a mirror, a reflection of her own vulnerabilities and insecurities. It was something Caroline wasn't used to facing. For once, her sharp tongue had come back to haunt her. As the cameras continued to roll, Caroline forced herself to keep up the appearance of the confident, unflappable host. But deep down, a storm was brewing inside her. What was this all about? She thought, why did I attack him in the first place? Why does it feel like I've been exposed? But before she could fully process her thoughts, Keanu took another unexpected step. Caroline, he said, his voice still steady and calm. I think you're looking for something in this interview that might not be here. Maybe this moment isn't about trying to score points. Maybe it's about understanding each other. The words hung in the air like an invitation. Keanu wasn't just speaking to Caroline anymore. He was speaking to everyone in the room. The audience had gone from uncertain murmurs to an almost reverent silence, unsure of how to react to this unexpected turn of events. Caroline, suddenly feeling small under the weight of his words, was momentarily speechless. The host, who had always prided herself on her ability to control the conversation, found herself caught in a vulnerable, uncharted territory. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his expression still gentle. I've been in this industry long enough to know that we all wear masks. We all have our defenses, but you can't really get to know someone if you don't let the masks fall. I think that's what you were really looking for in this interview, right? Something real. The truth in his words struck Caroline harder than she anticipated. She wasn't just trying to stir the pot for ratings or for a good story. She was searching for something deeper, something meaningful. She'd become so accustomed to hiding behind her sharp commentary, her biting humor, that she'd forgotten what it was like to truly connect with someone. There was a quiet pause as Caroline absorbed his words. It was as if time slowed down for a moment. The weight of what she had said to Keanu, the words that had felt so impulsive in the heat of the moment, now seemed so unnecessary. She had wanted to challenge him, but instead, he had made her question the very persona she had spent years cultivating. I'm sorry, Keanu, Caroline finally said, her voice softer than before. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I guess I've been too focused on the wrong things. Keanu smiled, a genuine, understanding smile. It's okay, Caroline. We all get caught up sometimes. The important part is learning from it. The audience, once on edge, exhaled in unison. The energy in the room shifted completely. It was no longer about who had the better comeback. It was about a moment of real human connection. a rare and beautiful thing in the world of celebrity interviews. Caroline, now sitting in the quiet of her own thoughts, realized just how much she had missed by staying within her comfort zone of sharp jabs and well-rehearsed interviews. Keanu's words had cut through her defenses, revealing a side of herself she hadn't seen in years. But the journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Keanu's response, while kind, had sparked something inside Caroline. She wasn't sure what it was yet, but she knew that this encounter had changed her. And the most surprising thing of all was that Keanu hadn't just left her with an apology or a simple act of kindness. He had given her something far more powerful, an invitation to change. For the first time, Caroline wondered if she had been so busy focusing on the masks others wore that she had forgotten to take off her own. And as the cameras continued to roll, she found herself in the rarest of positions, asking herself questions she had never dared to ask before. This moment, however, would only mark the beginning of a much bigger transformation, one that would have ripple effects far beyond the walls of the studio. But what would Caroline do next? Would she take the lesson Keanu had so quietly given her? Or would she retreat back into the comfort of her old ways? The real turning point was coming. And you won't want to miss it. Make sure you've subscribed to continue following Caroline's journey and to see how Keanu's actions leave everyone in awe. Things are about to get even more interesting. The moment that had seemed so simple at first, a mere celebrity interview, was now taking on a life of its own. Keanu's words had not only left Caroline shaken, but had set in motion something deeper, something she hadn't expected. What had begun as an uncomfortable exchange on live television was now transforming into a turning point in her life. For the first time in ages, Caroline found herself questioning everything. Who was she really beneath all the defenses? Why did she feel compelled to lash out at Keanu in the first place? And most importantly, why did his calmness make her feel both exposed and enlightened? After the interview, Caroline left the set feeling like she was walking in a fog. She had been on top of the world as a TV host, her sharp tongue and quick wit earning her accolades. But now she felt like she was on the edge of something entirely new, and it terrified her. Her mind raced through the moments of the interview, replaying Keanu's composed, almost zen-like responses to her provocations. His response wasn't just about forgiving her, it was about showing her another way to live, a way that wasn't governed by anger or defensiveness, but by peace and understanding. Was it possible to live that way, she wondered? Was it possible to be truly free of the masks she'd worn for so long? But there was something else too, an unexpected pang of admiration for Keanu. She had spent years crafting her public image, and yet here was a man who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He didn't play the fame game. He just was. His humility, his wisdom, and his unwavering strength in the face of her insult had left her in awe. Back at her apartment later that evening, Caroline sat alone, staring at the reflection in the window. How had she gotten so far away from who she was, she asked herself. How had she let the world's expectations of her turn her into someone she barely recognized? She thought about the story Keanu had briefly mentioned during the interview, the loss of his girlfriend Jennifer in a tragic accident. How had he, despite such profound heartache, been able to maintain his sense of peace and still show up for others with kindness? He could have easily become jaded, withdrawn, or bitter. But he hadn't. As Caroline reflected on Keanu's strength, the full impact of the conversation began to sink in. This wasn't just about a celebrity interview anymore. This was about a lesson that could change her entire life. She knew it was. Time to stop hiding behind the sharpness of her words and start doing the hard work of looking within. It wasn't going to be easy. After all, peeling back the layers of defensiveness, vulnerability, and self-doubt was no small task. But in that moment, Caroline realized that she wasn't alone in this. She had seen someone, Keanu, who had been through unimaginable loss and had still chosen to show up with grace and humility. The emotional weight of it all hit Caroline hard. It wasn't just the guilt for insulting Keanu. It was the realization that she had let herself become so detached from her own humanity. Had she been hiding all these years? Had she been so focused on maintaining control that she forgot how to truly connect with others? Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking her thoughts. It was a text message from her producer, asking how she felt about the interview. Caroline paused for a moment before typing her response. "I think Keanu just taught me something important. I need to figure out how to be more like him, more real, more vulnerable." She hit send and sat back, feeling the weight of the truth in her words. She wasn't sure what the future held for her career or even for her personal life, but she knew this. She had to change. As Caroline sat there processing everything that had happened, she began to wonder if this was a sign that perhaps her time as the hard-edged host was coming to an end. Maybe it was time for her to embrace the kind of raw authenticity that Keanu embodied so effortlessly. It was terrifying to think about, but deep down she knew it was the only way forward. Meanwhile, the world outside remained oblivious to the profound shift that had just occurred on live television. But for Caroline, and perhaps for Keanu too, that seemingly small moment, his gentle, insightful response to her sharp insult, was about to change everything. In that instant, the trajectory of her career and her very life took a different turn. And as she braced herself for the journey ahead, one thing was clear: there was no turning back. Before we move on to the next chapter, be sure to subscribe and follow the unfolding story. Caroline's journey is only beginning, and you won't want to miss the challenges she'll face and the new lessons she will learn along the way. The days after the interview felt like a blur for Caroline. It was as if the world had shifted beneath her feet, and nothing seemed quite as solid as it once had. For the first time in years, she couldn't look at herself in the mirror without feeling a mixture of guilt, frustration, and curiosity. She had spent so long wearing a mask, building a persona that was meant to be invincible, clever, and always in control. But now, as the reality of her encounter with Keanu sunk in, she realized how much of herself she had been hiding. The relentless pace of her work, the demands of her public image, and the need to always be on had drained her. She had become so focused on keeping up the facade of sharpness, sarcasm, and wit that she had forgotten what it felt like to be vulnerable, to be real. It wasn't long before Caroline realized that Keanu had done more than just defend himself on that stage. He had given her an invitation to open herself up, to stop hiding behind her armor, and to finally confront the things she had buried deep within. She had spent the past week replaying the interview in her mind. "Struggles don't define you, Caroline. It's how you deal with them that does." The words had stayed with her, echoing in her thoughts like a constant hum. And as she reflected on them, Caroline understood. Keanu wasn't just talking about his struggles, he was talking about life itself. It wasn't about avoiding pain, criticism, or conflict. It was about how you chose to react to those moments, how you chose to grow from them. Caroline began to understand that her outburst on the show had been a reflection of her own internal battles, her fears, her insecurities, and the desire to control everything around her. But Keanu's calmness, his composure in the face of her insult, had shaken her, and in that moment she had realized that it wasn't about winning the fight. It was about how you handled the battle within yourself. In the days that followed, Caroline made a decision. She was going to stop hiding. She was going to stop pretending to be someone she wasn't. The sharp-tongued persona had gotten her far in her career, but it had also isolated her. It had kept her at a distance from the very people she needed the most: her audience, her colleagues, and, perhaps most importantly, herself. Caroline knew it wouldn't be easy. There were years of habits to break, years of self-doubt to confront. But for the first time she felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that there was something better waiting for her on the other side of this change. She wasn't sure what that better looked like yet, but she knew it was out there, just beyond the veil of her carefully crafted persona. It was during one of her many sleepless nights that Caroline decided to reach out to Keanu. She had no idea what kind of response she would get, but she felt an overwhelming need to thank him, not just for being so gracious during the interview, but for showing her that there was a way out of the prison she had built for herself. She sat at her desk, hesitating for a moment before typing the message. It was simple, honest, and to the point. "Keanu, I just wanted to reach out and thank you. The interview really affected me in a way I wasn't expecting." Your response to me wasn't just calm, it was a lesson in grace, humility, and vulnerability. I've spent my whole life trying to control everything, and I see now that it's the wrong approach. I want to learn how to be more like you. Thank you for showing me that." She hit send and sat back, unsure of what to expect next. The next morning, as Caroline poured herself a cup of coffee, her phone buzzed with a message from Keanu. She opened it quickly, holding her breath. "Caroline, I'm glad the interview had that effect on you. It's not always easy to be open and honest, especially in a world that expects us to put on a show. But the most important thing is that you've recognized the need for change. Change doesn't happen overnight, but the fact that you're willing to make that shift is everything. Keep going and don't be afraid to be real. You'll be amazed at the strength that comes from vulnerability." Caroline read the message several times, a lump forming in her throat. She hadn't expected this kind of response. She had anticipated some polite words, maybe even a friendly gesture. But Keanu's response was far more than that. It was a validation of the feelings she had been wrestling with in the days since the interview. As she sat there, feeling the weight of his words sink in, Caroline realized that she had been looking for permission to change. And Keanu had just given her that permission, not by telling her what to do, but by showing her that it was possible. It was possible to step into the unknown, to embrace vulnerability, and to live more authentically. The next few weeks were a blur of self-reflection, new beginnings, and small steps toward change. Caroline began to loosen her grip on the perfectionism that had once driven her, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to be less than perfect. She spoke from the heart, shared her struggles openly with her audience, and learned to find strength in her vulnerability. And though the world around her continued to spin with its usual frenzy, Caroline knew that she was no longer the same woman who had sat in that studio months ago. She had found something deeper, something more meaningful, her own authenticity. As for Keanu, he remained the same, kind, humble, and untouched by the chaos of the world around him. But Caroline had learned that the true strength in life wasn't in the battles you fought with others. It was in the battles you fought with yourself. And with that lesson in mind, Caroline Leavitt began a new chapter of her life, one where grace, vulnerability, and humility were her guiding lights. Before we end this chapter of Caroline's journey, be sure to subscribe for more updates. You'll want to stay tuned for her continued growth and the lessons she'll learn along the way, because sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most profound changes. The weeks following Caroline's transformation felt like a new beginning. She was different now, in ways she couldn't fully explain to anyone, but she knew it, deep down. She had become a person who was no longer driven by the need to control every situation. She was finding comfort in vulnerability, in authenticity, in showing up for herself as much as she showed up for others. But the most unexpected part of this journey, it was the feedback from her audience. At first, Caroline was nervous. She had no idea how her viewers would react to the new her. Would they miss the sharp-tongued, no-nonsense persona they had come to know and love? Or would they embrace the more vulnerable, reflective side of her that had emerged since the interview with Keanu? She remembered the first live show after her self-reflection began. Caroline sat at the desk, the familiar stage lights casting a soft glow on her face. Her usual script was on the table, but for the first time she didn't feel bound by it. She knew she had a message to share, but it wasn't the snarky, biting humor she was known for. It was something more real. "Tonight, I want to share something with all of you," she began, looking directly into the camera. "I've spent years trying to be perfect on screen, to hide behind a wall of sharp comments and jokes, but I realized that I've been hiding from all of you, and more importantly, from myself. Life isn't about being perfect, or always being right. It's about being honest, even when it's uncomfortable." The audience's reaction was a mix of surprise, curiosity, and, surprisingly, support. Viewers flooded the show's comment section, their responses ranging from appreciation for her vulnerability to support for her personal growth. It was a side of Caroline that no one had seen before, and they appreciated it. Caroline, one viewer, commented, "You've been one of my favorites for years, but seeing you be real like this is so refreshing. It's like we're finally getting to know the real you. Caroline was both humbled and amazed. She never expected this level of understanding from her viewers, but it was precisely what she needed to hear. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was no longer carrying the burden of perfection, but as with all things in life, there were challenges ahead. The pressure to maintain this new, more authentic version of herself loomed over Caroline. Would she slip back into her old ways of sharp remarks and defensive humor? Could she really keep this up? Days later, the answer came unexpectedly. It was during a private conversation with her producer, the person who had seen her evolve over the past few months. "You know, Caroline," he said thoughtfully, "you've changed. But what's incredible is how you've allowed your audience to be part of that journey. They're rooting for you because they're not just seeing the host, they're seeing the person behind the persona." Those words resonated with Caroline deeply. She had never truly realized how much her audience had been invested in her life. They weren't just watching her for the laughs or the drama. They were watching because they felt a connection with her, and that connection, she realized, was built on the shared vulnerability of being human. It was a powerful realization. From that moment, Caroline decided that she would lean into this vulnerability even more. She would use her platform to not only entertain, but to open up discussions about self-reflection, personal growth, and the importance of showing up as your true self. She would continue to share her own journey with her audience, knowing that they too were on their own paths of self-discovery. One night during a live broadcast, she addressed her viewers directly. "I know I've said a lot of things that have upset people over the years. I know I've built this persona that's quick with a quip and sharp with a jab, but I've learned that life isn't about winning. It's about understanding. It's about learning and growing. And I want to bring you along with me as I continue to grow into the person I'm meant to be." Her words were met with a flood of supportive messages from viewers, many of whom expressed their admiration for her openness. Some even shared their own stories of personal growth and the challenges they had faced. As Caroline read through the comments, she felt a sense of peace settle within her. She realized that this was just the beginning. Her journey wasn't about reaching a destination. It was about continuing to evolve, to learn, and to share those lessons with others. The story of Caroline's transformation had come full circle. What started as a moment of conflict on live TV had sparked something far greater than either Caroline or Keanu could have anticipated. But now, as she reflected on everything she had learned, Caroline knew that this wasn't the end of the story. It was merely a chapter in an ongoing narrative. The lessons of vulnerability, humility, and personal growth would continue to shape her journey. And just like Keanu had shown her, it was through embracing the struggle that she would find her true strength. She wasn't just a TV host anymore. She was a woman on a path to understanding herself, and through that, understanding others. And in the end, that was the most profound lesson she could ever learn. As Caroline moves forward, continuing to share her journey with her audience, remember, her story isn't finished yet. There are still lessons to be learned, obstacles to overcome, and moments of self-discovery waiting for her. So, what about you? What lessons from Caroline's transformation resonate with you? Have you ever found yourself hiding behind a mask? And how might embracing vulnerability help you become the person you're meant to be? Feel free to share your thoughts and reflections below. Don't forget to subscribe, and stay tuned for more updates on Caroline's journey as she continues to learn, grow, and inspire us all along the way.